Here's what happened in football history in 1914. In the ongoing series of Football History Rewind, part number 33, we take a look around the game that year to see some of the rules revisions and the teams and coaches' innovations and brilliant plays made. We have these stories and more coming up for you in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with pigskindispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of Pigskin Dispatch. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And we are here for another edition on our ongoing series of covering football year by year. We're all the way up to year 1914. This is Football History Rewind, part number 33. And there was new innovations were allowing teams of obscurity in the football world to find some success and respect from the traditional powerhouses of the East. Notre Dame's victory over Army the previous year gave coaches of lesser schools hope that they could play with the big boys if they prepared well and used their minds. The season of 1914 saw a few new wrinkles become unveiled by the smaller schools as well. Now, Illinois is a very interesting case in this. Now, Coach Bob Zuppke, one of the great geniuses of the game, was only in his second year at the helm of University of Illinois, but he had a program on the rise, the group of very good players in his system. His biggest success came from a new offensive alignment that he innovated called the I formation. In the I formation, the quarterback was under center, and the other three backs lined up directly behind him in a straight line that went north and south on the field. And the formation caused confusion to defenders as it sent all three backs forward into the line, usually running on both sides past the quarterback. And a quarterback could hand off to any one of these backs or keep the ball himself. And a defender had to take a second to figure out who exactly had that ball, and sometimes by that point it was much too late for him to make a tackle, as the runner may be beyond him and down the field. And in later years of Zuppke's 29-year stint as a head coach of the Illini, he innovated many new concepts. He used the backwards pitch as plays to cause confusion to defenses. His most famous play of this type was the hook and lateral pass play. Now, Zuppke is also credited with being the pioneer in offensive line play. He taught his guards to drop back at the snap and move in new ways. And this was always something totally new because of the basic premise in football in those days was if you never gave up ground on the line. The most famous play for Zuppke for this concept was the screen pass play, and it just threw defenses all out of kilter. Now, one of Zuppke's other strong contributions to the game was to charge his teams up emotionally before the games. Newt Rockne, who would later coach at that same Notre Dame team that he once played for that we talked about last time, is also given credit for propelling the same strategy of firing up the troops before they took the field. And speaking of Notre Dame, Jesse Harper was the coach at Notre Dame squad, and they were still feeling good about their 1913 victory over Army. That is, until they played Yale the next year, 1914, at New Haven. The Irish were crushed 28-0 in the game, but the long train ride back to Indiana was not a time for depression for Harper and his new assistant, Newt Rockne. It was a time for revamping their offensive system. Harper overhauled the Notre Dame offense by first implementing the backfield shift he learned from Amos Alonzo Stagg at Chicago. Now, Rockne helped by implementing a new concept of having the ends spaced out away from the tackles a step or two, giving a gap in there. And he also had these same ends shift in or out with the backs. Very interesting concepts. We know that to be very commonplace today, but just think of that, almost 110 years ago was unheard of, and Rockne helped develop that. Now, some teams in the Midwest and the Southern teams made their presence known. Now, teams in the Southern Midwest of the country were starting to make names for themselves at this time in history. Schools like Auburn and Texas were rattling off impressive seasons. Texas went undefeated in 1914, scoring 358 points in an 8-game season. The rise of the South would continue in 1915 when powerhouses such as Nebraska and Oklahoma would come of age, and the Huskers would post a remarkable record over a short span, posting 35 wins and 2 losses in just 3 seasons from 1911 to 1914 under the guidance of Coach Ewald Jumbo Stein. And the game was really put them on the map was a 1-point victory over Notre Dame in 1915. Oklahoma in 1915 did something that no one had ever done before. They made the forward pass their main offensive weapon. Yeah, remember the forward pass is only 9 years old, being legal, and really 1912 it really opened up, so only really 3 years of being used commonplace. But it really wasn't commonplace like we know it today. Coach Benny Owen recognized that his running game was poor. He couldn't run anywhere. Even with opponents preparing for an aerial assault by the Sooners, they still rattled off 25 touchdowns via the pass that year. And Oklahoma won all 10 of its games and racked up over 1,700 yards through the air that season, averaging about 30 passes per game. Now, teams in the South Central area enjoyed successive rivalry so much, they did decide to form a league of their own named the Southwest Conference. The 8 original members were Oklahoma, Arkansas, Oklahoma A&M, Texas, Baylor, Texas A&M, Louisiana State, and Southwestern. And at the end of the season, Southern Methodist and Rice replaced Oklahoma and LSU in the conference, and the year after that, Southwestern dropped out. The stadiums were being built with construction that had not been seen in the American athletics before. Princeton followed Harvard's lead in 1914 by completing Palmer Stadium with enough seats to have over 45,000 in attendance. But not to be outdone, the Yale Bowl with its 64,000 seats was finished right near the end of November in 1914. Things were changing in the game and fast, and according to author Timothy P. Brown in his book, How Football Became Football, the kick-out following a touchback was eliminated by the Rules Committee. The Big Ten recommended its teams to start wearing numbers, and the first post-game crowd to take down the goalpost occurred at Parsons High School in Kansas as they were frustrated by their team's 81-6 shellacking from a local rival. And it was over all a century ago, but boy, does this sound familiar in some of these cases or not. Well, football was indeed becoming a national phenomenon, and competitive teams across the land, and things were just starting to get interesting. There was also some titles handed out. There was a 3-way tie considered as the national champions in the collegiate game, according to many experts posthumously later on in the years, as Illinois, Texas, and Army all received consideration many years later. In the pro game, it was the Akron Indians repeating as the champs of Ohio, defeating Canton 21-0. And as we said, for many years, the champions of the Mystical Ohio League were considered to be the best professional team around. And probably not too far off. And Akron won it 2 years there in a row, 1913 and 1914. Well, we have plenty more years to cover. We're going to get more into 1915 and cover some more of the great football that you love. And next time on Football History Rewind, part number 34, look for it soon. And we thank you for listening, and we hope you'll be back tomorrow to hear some more great football history and some of our other segments here on PigskinDispatch.com. And don't forget to check out Jersey Dispatch for some history on sports of all genres and all team sports. So we hope you'll join us there too. So until tomorrow, everybody, have a great gridiron day. Peeking up at the clock, the time's running down. We're going to go into victory formation, take a knee, and let this baby run out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for the next podcast. We invite you to check out our website, PigskinDispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. PigskinDispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. A special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? You should check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Pictorum Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. Instead of a boring old tie, get him a historic baseball photo taken by Henry High Sandom at the historic Polo Grounds Stadium in New York City during the 1894 Temple Cup. Or, if he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL poster. These are so good looking that you'll be amazed how they turn out. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order.